It's amazing how fast God is moving. If you knew me, and my wife would vouch, I am probably the most impatient person that's ever been born and served in ministry. Like I said today, things matter. I mean, I count things out. I calculate. These things matter to me. And Tanya, one of our young ladies, Tanya Altamirano, one of our young ladies from Nicaragua, put that video together just to kind of show a quick glimpse of what is happening in Trailhead, especially in Latin America. It's incredible that when we make a video, by the time it actually gets set up to kind of print the video, it's already outdated. You know, you go, okay, we just did this video, we're in 30 countries. Nope, now we're in 40 countries. We're directly impacting the souls of 30,000 people. No, it's 40,000. It's just, God is just moving that fast. And, you know, all of my ministry, I've heard about, well, be patient, it's God's timing or whatever. What I have seen in the past 3 years especially is I've always been in a hurry. Boom, 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 boom. Get up early, go to bed late. Boom, 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 just cranking. And that was before ministry. It's just a personality trait. But in the last 3 years, things have flipped on me, and it's like I can't keep up with how fast God is moving. And it's not just because I'm 53 years old now. It's because He's moving that fast. And you may not always get to see it everywhere. I promise you, you're not getting to see that necessarily in the Middle East, but it's happening in the Middle East. You're not getting to necessarily see that happen in Albuquerque, but it's happening in Albuquerque. And I explained to you that let's say there's 150 people here today. No. Because that number that you're shooting for is 74,866 plus 150. You see, you can't think in your human accounting. You can't think in your human mathematics. This church is giving over $250,000 to missions. That means that Berean is in multiple nations around the world. So you're running right now this year, it looks like you're running about 75,000 people. Congratulations, Berean Baptist Church. And then I love this theme, prove it. I don't know about you, but I like the pre-fight interviews. I know it's so sinful. When they get up and they stare each other in the eyes, and they're acting all tough or whatever. But nobody proves anything. They're just all talk. Until they get in the ring and somebody proves it. And then you find out who was the real deal and who was the chump. And in Christianity, not to be overly offensive, because I'm not pointing out any one individual, because I'm careful not to do that. But in Christianity, there's lots of chumps. We can talk the talk, but are we walking the walk? Are we putting our actions where our mouth is? Are we putting our money where our mouth is? Are we living our lives where our mouth is saying we're living? Are we literally going to prove it? Because I think one of the biggest bummers for me in ministry is that people don't have to work for their salvation. Because if you had to work for your salvation, maybe you'd get off your rear, right? And do something. But since salvation is what they call in Spanish, in that beautiful verse, the gift of God. In Spanish, it's la dádiva de Dios. Dádiva means a gift you don't deserve. That's grace. But in that text, James 2:18, but someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith, but my works. Put your money where your mouth is. Show me your faith without your works, and you're a chump. We're not doing something for the kingdom of God. We're free riding. We're riding on somebody else. We're warming up a church seat. You see, the gospel needs to be spread, and we are the hands and feet of Jesus. And if we don't do it, people are only being born to die and go to hell. What the book of James is all about, basically, is this. Make good on your word. Prove it. I am so convinced, and this was before I knew what your theme was, I'm so convinced of the importance of the book of James that being the incredibly wealthy father that I am, I offered my daughter a whopping $100. She would memorize verbatim and be able to quote the entire book of James. Now, what 16-year-old girl is going to go, yeah, right, $100 for the entire book of the Bible? My daughter did. And right before this trip, she came upstairs after weeks of hearing her downstairs practicing. She goes, I'm ready. So we opened up the Bible, and my 16-year-old daughter quoted the entire book of James, verbatim, by memory, pausing where the commas are, stopping where the periods are, because I'm real particular. I'm that guy. And she knew she'd come up there and she would pause at the comma. I'd be like, oh, it doesn't sound like you're ready. No, she was ready. Why is that important? Because I want my daughter to prove it. I don't want her to just be a Christian. I don't want her to just have faith, but I want her to also have works. In other words, I want her to do something for the kingdom. Live your life in such a way that you are a mentor to the next generation. I don't know about you, but ministry to me is like pretty much the best thing ever. My oldest daughter graduated from Bible college and is now getting her biblical counseling degree and is married to a worship pastor of Antioch Bible Baptist Church of Kansas City, Missouri. My middle daughter is in youth ministry doing an internship here in town. She loves Albuquerque. I don't think I'm going to get my daughter back. My daughter wants to be a missionary. So did the other two. So who knows what God will actually do with her. The point is, there is a why in the road, and my daughters heard this their entire lives. You can choose success or you can choose significance. Significance is whatever God wants you to do with your life. And they heard that since they were in the womb, because I've been quoting that statement from myself for their entire lives and even before they were born. Success or significance. And if you are successful, use your success for significance. And then you have significance. In James, we see 50 command verbs clauses. James doesn't recommend, but he says you must do it because true faith produces good works. You don't work for your salvation, but true faith will produce works. In other words, you're going to want to do something for the kingdom. We don't work to be saved, we work because he saved us. That's a pretty simple concept. It's obedience. What we do is in honor of the one that saved us, the one that sent his son, the one that gave his grace. It's obedience. So now what? You prove it. And there's a text in the Bible where a guy just didn't prove it. In 2 Kings chapter 13, verses 14 through 19, you have the story of Elisha with a king that was at best mediocre in his faith. In 2 Kings chapter 13, verses 14 through 19 is a prove it verse, and he didn't prove it. And it exemplifies much of Christianity today, that we go so far, but then we stop. We're only ready to run so hard, ready to do so much, but there's an end to our faithfulness. There's an end to our works, unfortunately. Elisha, verse 14, in 2 Kings chapter 13, beginning in verse 14, Elisha had become sick with the illness of which he would die. Then Joash, the king of Israel, came down to him and wept over his face and said, "Oh, my father, the chariots of Israel and their horsemen." So you're thinking, oh, he's sad, he's losing his prophet friend. No. His friend's about to die, and he's talking about the enemy being encamped around him. What's he worried about? He's worried about, in essence, to put it in the simplest form, he's worried about losing his lucky rabbit's foot, his genie in the lamp. He's going to lose the one that has proven it, but he hasn't proven it himself, so he has to hide behind the prophet of God for all his good stuff. And Elijah, verse 15, and Elisha said to him, take a bow and some arrows. So he took himself a bow and some arrows. Then he said to the king of Israel, put your hand on the bow. So he put his hand on it. And Elisha put his hands on the king's hands. And he said, open the east window. And he opened it. Then Elisha said, shoot. And he shot. And he said, the arrow of the Lord's deliverance, and the arrow of deliverance from Syria. For you must strike the Syrians at Aphek till you have destroyed them. So, what's going on here? It's the silliest sounding story ever. This prophet of God's talking to this king. He's worried about the enemy being encamped around him. He tells the king to take his bow, take an arrow out of the bag here, put it on the string, and shoot the arrow out the window. It's the dumbest sounding thing in the world, really. I mean, if you were the king, you'd be like, okay, that's weird, but whatever. So he shoots the arrow. But then he says, by doing this, you're going to defeat your enemy. Now, if I'm the king, and I'm hiding behind this spiritual leader that's obviously connected to the power of God, and he says, man, by shooting that arrow out the window, you're going to get all these blessings. Well, I'm going to ask for like 1,000 arrows, and I'm going to start shooting tons of arrows out of tons of windows, because I want all the blessings I can get from God. You would think that that's how he would think, but that's not really how it plays out. It's in verse 16, then he said to the king of Israel, put your hand on the bow. So he put his hands on it, and Elijah put his hands on the king's hands. And he said, open the east window, and he opened it. Then Elijah said, shoot, and he shot. And he said, the arrow of the Lord's deliverance, and the arrow of deliverance from Syria, for you must strike the Syrians at Aphek till you have destroyed them. That's the good stuff. You're like, wow, I shot an arrow out, so now I get all this victory. Then you go down to verse 18, and it gets weird. You see, I heard this story, or actually I've read it, but then I heard my wife reading a book, and then she was reading the Bible text, because my wife is literally my audiobook. I don't know if anybody else does it. My wife enjoys reading to me and has for the nearly 30 years we've been married. And so she's reading us, and I said, wait, read this again? Verse 18, then he said, take the arrows. So he took them. And he said to the king of Israel, strike the ground. So he struck 3 times and stopped. Okay, he said take the arrows, plural. Now I'm reading that as take them all. Shoot them out the window. But the king only takes 3 of them and shoots 3 of them out the window. Now as I'm listening to this the first time, I'm thinking, not a big deal. He's just like kind of compliant. Okay, here's 3 arrows. I shot them out the window. But then in verse 19, it gets really, really weird. And the man of God was angry with him and said, you should have struck 5 or 6 times, then you would have struck Syria till you had destroyed it. But now you will strike Syria only 3 times. So now you only get a partial blessing for going halfway. Are you getting where I'm going? You only go halfway with the requirements, and you're only going to get half the blessings. You want to grow this church? You want to impact your family? You want to impact your marriage? You want to be a parent that impacts their children? You better be all in. You see, this theme of prove it is perfect. Prove that you're all in. Joash seemed to lack the motivation to go all the way. It didn't seem fair that he was going to lose a blessing for just shooting 3 arrows, but the bottom line is he quit. He only went halfway. He didn't prove it. He only kind of went in. Maybe it was silly to him. It doesn't matter. The king wasn't fully committed to what the man of God was telling him to do. And he said the arrows. Now, I'm not going to divide and dissect what was going on in this moment, but we don't know. But if the man of God, the prophet of God, who's speaking for God himself says, shoot all the arrows, and he speaks in plural, man, you empty that bag. Every last single one of them. Since he wasn't rooted, he lost his impact. Since he wasn't all in, he lost his impact. Since he wasn't all in, he didn't prove anything. You quit, and your impact and significance and future is over. Your legacy is done. You got to prove it until the very, very end. I'm here representing missions and so many things. Man, when you watch that video, it's just a hodgepodge of everything because you can't even explain everything that's going on with God right now. I get to be with Familia Avance in 5 countries. I'm the founder of Avance Sports, and I thought it was just going to go to one place for one church, and it went all over the world. That's God. That whole Trailhead Rapid Food Relief, a girl in Nicaragua dreamed that up. Now they've impacted up to 1.4 million people because of it. Because of some girl in Nicaragua had a cool idea. Because I listened to her and took the time to listen to a crazy idea, God blessed it, and it's impacting people. And Trailhead was a crazy idea where a pastor quit his job to go start a nonprofit. And it was doing okay-ish up until about 3 years, and then it 10x'd and just blew up. And that's called Trailhead International. Folks, if we don't go all in and say, God wants me to quit this and do this and change this and jump in and go head first. I always liked Pete Rose. Be careful, I get sidetracked a lot. Pete Rose was cool in one way. I always respected a man, 2 ways. Number one, if it was an inside pitch, he took it on the thigh. That's a little grit right there. Professional pitcher tags you in the thigh. It's coming in. Most guys do this. Pete Rose did this. But then when he slid, he didn't slide like other people. He just went head first. Just head first, man. I mean, it's like you're going to get your nose knocked off. He didn't care. Shouldn't we just go head first, all in, no matter the cost for the cause of Christ? Yes, we should. Global missions. What is the church doing globally? What is Berean doing globally? It's all about evangelism. It's all about the local church. And I'm kind of getting tired of all the humanitarian stuff. If we do humanitarian stuff like the Avance Sports, what's that about? At-risk youth outreach to plug them into the local church, disciple them, and most of those guys are becoming our pastors. Trailhead Rapid Food Relief. We go in and we train people in personal evangelism before they're allowed to even be a part of it. Who cares if we hand out a bunch of food if nobody gets saved? Filling bellies and sending people to hell would be the dumbest idea ever. But if the local church goes out and shows Christ's love and shares the plan of salvation with trained young people that are trained in the skills of communicating in personal evangelism and lead those people to Christ, John 3:16, Romans 3:10, Romans 3:23, Romans 5:8, Romans 6:23, Romans 10:9 through 10, boom, 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 and they're quoting it. And leading people to Christ. How can we prove it then? You see, number one, you believe in God's power. That'll be, I think, the second slide coming up after this one. The next one. There we go. Said you can't change the whole world, but you can change someone's world. Every single person matters when they accept Christ. That's why we focus on the one. You don't hit 30 and 40,000 people until you focus on the one. And if you hit 30 and 40,000 people, you still focus on the one. Next slide, please. 40 nations, 200 plus projects. And folks, here's my statement to you. Are you with us or are you not? Because we're just now getting started and we're just now getting warmed up. And those numbers would sound pretty big if you didn't know the numbers of planet Earth. Because there's 8 billion people on planet Earth. most of which don't know Jesus. So we're just now getting started. We're just now getting warmed up. Next slide. And you build, yes, believe in God's power. When I went to the mission field, a missionary in Costa Rica, not my father-in-law, gave me this little book called The Prayer of Jabez. Remember that? And I told you kind of where I was from originally, not from a church family. We weren't church people. And so everything in Christianity, especially in ministry, because I didn't grow up in ministry, everything's new and fresh to me. So I got this Prayer of Jabez book, and it said this thing about praying that God would expand your territory, and some guy named Jabez did that, and they were listing like 300 names in the Bible, and it pauses to talk about somebody who prayed boldly and asked for God to bless him indeed, to expand his coast, to expand his territory, which is pretty obvious. That's expanding your impact. And I'm like, well, that's cool. And I was in language school. And I'm like, so I'm going to pray that. Because if it worked for Jabez, it'll work for us, right? I mean, you just make the assumption. And sometimes I confuse faith and ignorance. At that point in my life, I was ignorant enough that I didn't know better. So I'm like, yeah, that'll work. And so I started praying the Prayer of Jabez for our ministry in Nicaragua. And then that exploded. Then we expanded into the Avance Sports of Costa Rica with all those churches, and then Panama, and then Cuba. And then Trailhead comes along, and then we just started expanding more. And then we go into the Dominican Republic and Haiti. We're building our 10th church in Haiti right now, and our 7th in the Dominican Republic. Crazy. 17 churches on one island. And I didn't know that God was literally going to expand my coast, because then I became the director of Latin America, which meant basically the Western Hemisphere. And my little 16-year-old, when she was 12 years old, the one that memorized the book of James, she wanted to have a serious conversation with Dad one morning. And she goes, Dad, when you get too old to do this, will you just give me Latin America? As if her dad owned all of Latin America. She was convinced that I controlled all things Latin America. Right? You can also convince him you're Superman. I convinced him that I was born on Krypton. Things like that. But you believe in God's power with that faith of a child. And God did, and it went from Nicaragua to all of Central America, to all of the Americas. Now it's Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Caribbean, Eurasia. Wow, why? Because God wants to reach people. Not because he wants to expand who we are, but he wants to expand his church and his love and his grace to the nations. My full buy-in to this prayer of Jabez is what kind of started it off for me. Believe in God's calling us to do more is what it says there. That sports complex is at a location where a young man's mom didn't want him and wanted to abort him, and he found out when he was at the age of 15, when I was trying my best to be his father figure, that nobody wanted him and his mom wasn't his mom. And now he has this sports complex connected to his church. He's the president of Youth Extreme Nicaragua. He's the pastor of the church. He trains people in Avance Sports. He's the director of Avance Sports of Nicaragua. A kid that otherwise could have been aborted. And now his sports complex is bigger than the sports complex of the Olympic Training Center of Nicaragua, the country he lives in. But the amazing part is that in this past year, I spoke there, and that place right there, that space, was packed. Between the auditorium and that sports complex, they can seat 1,500. That's like the headquarters of any events we do in Nicaragua. The place was packed out. 4 years after I left Nicaragua. So it's the Nicaraguans doing it through God's power. Because of your generosity, Berean, these things have been made possible. You see there in this story in verse 14, Joash wasn't weeping the coming loss of Elijah. He was crying over the loss of his protector. Joash was losing the person connected to the power of God. He was losing the person that was proving it his whole life. And obviously, Joash, the king, didn't prove anything. Except he just hid behind somebody else. And isn't that what Christians do? They hide behind their church and let the church do everything, and they kind of warm benches. Say what it is. In sports, nobody wants to be a bench warmer. In Christianity, it's like everybody wants to be a bench warmer. In fact, the stats say 80% of the people are bench warmers. We got to self-evaluate and ask, have I only shot 3 arrows in my Christian life? Have I only given a partial amount of me over to the Lord? Number 3, believe in the Great Commission. That's the next slide. See, the Post-Coffee Church fills this place up like 7 days a week. It's not just about concrete. Not just about steel. Sometimes it's a church event. Sometimes it's a youth event. Sometimes it's a soccer event. Sometimes it's a volleyball event. But it's always an evangelism event. Because Avance Sports does not exist because somebody likes soccer. In fact, Avance Sports is the largest sports ministry in all of Central America. And no offense to soccer players, I don't even like the sport of soccer. I grew up playing street hockey, boxing, things like that. Soccer was never like a thing in my part of the nation. But soccer reaches thousands of kids because they're connected to the local church. So who cares if I like it or not? They like it. And people are coming to Christ not because of sports, but because of Christ's love. Believe in the Great Commission. You see there in verses 15 and 17, it was supposed to be a no questions asked, just pick up your bow and shoot the arrows. And that's what he did. If you remember, he picked up his bow, he shot an arrow, then he picked up the bow, and he shot 3 more arrows. But the man of God said arrows, which to me obviously means plural. And that obviously is why he got ticked off in verse 19, that he only shot 3 when he told him to pick up the arrows. It says there that he got mad about that. He shot 3 arrows. Didn't he do enough? I come to church once, twice a week. Isn't that enough? I drop a little bit in the offering plate. Isn't that enough? I once went on visitation like back in 1978. Isn't that enough? I mean, how much do you expect of me? All of you. All of you. Thousands of people are coming to Christ because of your generosity, Berean Baptist Church. But the stats tell me there's still some bench warmers. But that's okay. There's still a chance to get in the game. And maybe you're in the game and you can give more. I don't know what your situation is. I didn't know some random man that I met because of a friend bumped into him on the streets of another country would end up giving me $1.5 million toward a single project that you guys get to go serve in, by the way, and see that facility and the projects. I did the wise thing and made him a board member. Next slide. You see ladies like this, young ladies like this. She has another horrible story that I'm not going to explain in details. She came because of a soccer ministry from a horrendous family scenario that would make everyone cry. But just understand it's bad. She walked into a place that she saw love. She's a really good athlete. And today she's an even better Sunday school teacher. Because of your generosity. We have story after story after story after story of life changes. That's just one of them in Panama. Next slide. Believe in the Great Commission. So you believe in God's power. Number 2, you believe in God's call in you to do more for the kingdom. Number 3, believe in the Great Commission. No questions asked, just pick up your bows and shoot your arrows, just like he did there in verses 15 through 17. Folks, we're preparing other pastors by the hundreds throughout ministries, the trailheads connecting to around the world. Do you realize the incredible amount of financial resources that requires? Financial resources beyond our wildest imaginations. Nobody in Bible college ever told me that missions was a multi-million-dollar industry. That we don't make any extra for doing. We don't get wealthy for doing. We don't get a 401k for doing. But it's a multi-million-dollar industry that is filling heaven. And like Mike Napper, my buddy, always says, bankrupting hell. I bet he said it when he was here, didn't he? That's like his favorite thing. Bankrupting hell. You see that young lady there, we were at their wedding. That's a few years back. That's Norland and Mailing. He's from a neighborhood you'd be scared to death to walk around in. She's from a neighborhood that's worse than his neighborhood. Mailing is probably the most intelligent person I've ever met in my life. She was our 4.0 student in seminary. She is now the director of the seminary. She is the legal representative of all things that we do, buying properties, things of that nature in Nicaragua. And she's a kid from a home where she spent her whole life with a dirt floor, with an outhouse, an inner city in Managua that would make you scared to death to walk around at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Because of your generosity, Norland and Mailing accepted Christ. And now they are top shelf apex leaders in Familia Avance Nicaragua running the organization. The picture to your left, the most professional couple in the Managua church when I was pastoring that church, our biggest tithers. Both of them hold master's degrees. He actually still gets called back when they have testing for physics. He also has a chemical engineering degree. They quit their jobs to go to the Bible college, and I was their professor. And I watched them go up to Jalapa, Nicaragua, and plant a church. And then plant a Christian academy. But by the way, the Christian academy already runs over 300 students at the church school. So it's not just a church, not just Avance Sports, but also a Christian academy. But here's the crazy part. If they went into ministry, they were going to lose the property that they built a home on because the mom was radically Catholic and very anti-anything non-Catholic. They did it anyway and lost their home. And they had the nicest home of anybody in our church. Little by little, they've been rebuilding. They bought land, and they're building a home up in this area in Jalapa where they live. But I went up in the little rented place that they were at up in Jalapa while they were starting to plant the church, and I saw all of their secular degrees on a wall. And both of their Bible college degrees on another wall. And above this wall, they put up a sign that said, "I count all of this as trash for the gospel's sake." So they gave it all away to go into full-time Christian service. And she was the director of a major Christian academy in Managua. He was the subdirector of the largest high school in Managua. And they gave it all away. So when I say give, I'm not asking you to do something that we don't do and that our people don't do. You see there verses 18 and 19. On the next slide there, believe you can ruin your God-given purpose. Well, these are just more pictures of ministries. Cambodia, Madagascar, the couple in the upper left-hand corner, by the way. That's the Brazilian missionaries in Madagascar that we're building ministries with throughout Madagascar now. So not all missionaries are North Americans. Some of them are Nicaraguans named Dennis and Karen. And some of them are Brazilians. The next slide there. And then the food relief. Loving on people to bring them to the love of Christ and the grace of salvation. That's what it's all about. Next slide. Avance Sports has blown up around the world. You see that guy in the green shirt there? He's my best friend in Costa Rica. His name's Roger. He typically personally works with 12,000 youth per year. Over his ministry, he's worked with approximately 400,000 teenagers in multiple countries. So sometimes we hear about the impact of North Americans. It's them that's doing it. And I used to get a little embarrassed when people would treat me as the missionary as a hero. I'm here, they're there. They're the heroes, not me. Next slide. Believe you can ruin your God-given purpose. We just purchased this property in Panama for yet another church, for a congregation that had nothing. They were literally under the trees and in the mud, and now they have a facility. And there they are signing this property because of your generosity. See there in verses 18 and 19, he only shot half his arrows, or partial, or part of them, or three of the all. And the man of God gets angry with him, explains that now you're not going to get a full blessing. Believe you can ruin your God-given purpose. If you're not all in for the things of God, you are going to ruin your blessing. And it is a blessing to see what God is doing. And when you go to these other countries, you go to Togo, you go to Belize, you get to see the hand of God. You see, Joash obeyed, but he did the minimum. He only obeyed a little bit. He only did some. Sports fans, what happened on November 25th, 1980 that was pretty significant? Sports fans. I'll give you a hint, it was boxing. November 25th, 1980. Sugar Ray Leonard versus Roberto Duran II. The man known as the Fists of Stone. He was considered one of the most incredible fighters in boxing history, considered one of the top 5 Latin fighters in boxing history. Alexis Arguello, my friend from Nicaragua, he's one of the 5. Roberto Duran, one of the 5. But do you know that Roberto Duran is remembered for what happened on November 25th, 1980 more than all of his stats and all of his glory in the boxing ring? He did something that I would imagine he could go back in time. He would have trained harder, he would have done something different, or he would have chosen to die in the ring instead of do what he did. But that date represents the no mas fight. That's the day that he was fighting. There was the Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran II fight. And he said, no mas. You know what that means? No more. You know what that really means? I quit. So one of the top fighters in boxing history, in essence, just says, I quit. Now, no matter what his wonderful stats are, he was an incredible fighter. I'd love to meet him. But historically, he is always remembered by, I quit. His trainer didn't throw in the towel. He threw in the towel. Don't quit, Christians. Keep shooting your arrows until God calls you home. If you quit, your mission fails. Your significance fails. Trailhead International has what is referred to as exponential ministry growth. Do you know what that means? Snowball effect. When you get a snowball effect in an industry, in corporate America, in church ministry, in a local church, it's a snowball effect, and it's hard to stop exponential growth. In boxing, you learn combinations, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. You get them on. And then you get the overhand right, and that's like the awesome knockout one. But if you throw that, you're probably going to get caught by a right-hand hook and get knocked out yourself. But if you don't keep throwing the punches, you're never going to land one. This church has to keep going Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, week after week after week, shooting its arrows, throwing its punches, all in, never quitting, not giving up until you have sought to reach and talk to and invite every single person that lives in Albuquerque, or at least in your half. What about the people that don't know Jesus yet? You are the one potentially that could win them to Christ. I mentioned Alexis Arguello, considered one of the top fighters in boxing history, 88 professional fights, won 80 of them. He'll be in heaven waiting for you, by the way. They try to claim it as suicide. I don't know how many of you know about guns, but you don't double tap yourself through the chest. It was an assassination while he was the mayor of the city of Managua. He may have died. We talked about it multiple times because he was my friend. I wanted to double check and triple check. You know you're going to heaven, right? Yep. He accepted Christ. He's going to heaven. He's the one that convinced me to do Avance Sports in the first place, and I can't wait to get to heaven one day and say, guess what? That thing went to like 55 countries or 55 locations all over the world. And because of your generosity, it's made that possible. You see how this is all coming together as a package deal? We're all shooting our arrows. We're all doing something for the kingdom. We're all accomplishing something for the kingdom. But we can't stop until God is finished. We're soldiers of the cross. Now let me ask you this, because there's a difference. You can be a soldier of the cross, or you can be the special forces of the cross. When you're the special forces of the cross, you sign up to get a little bit more training, a little bit more serious, a little bit tougher. And there's something that used to exist in the baby boomer era. I am not a baby boomer, I'm Gen X. But something existed in the generation before me. That was called grit. Grit ended before my generation came along. I say we bring grit back to Christianity, because we have a foothold of the gospel going global around the world, and because of your generosity, we're making it explode. Folks, $250,000 plus a year, then 300,000, then $500,000, then $1 million. Imagine what we can do. God is on the move, and I promise you, I said it in the beginning, he is acting like he's in a hurry. And if he's in a hurry, that tells me something big is about to happen. And we don't know the day or the hour, but something big is about to happen. And when he comes back, don't you want to be busy? And if he's moving, and he's moving powerful, and he's moving strong in missions, it's time, like we say in Missouri, it's time to make hay while the sun's shining. My generation, if you didn't buck hay sometime in your life, you were never a man. Bucking hay's hard. Now they have machines to do it. Cheaters. Folks, let's shoot our arrows. Do the battle. Let the glory be given to God. I would challenge you, like it says, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. It's time to prove it. Pastor Jonathan?